Awesome. Hello, everybody. Welcome to my webinar. Awesome. Hello, everybody. Welcome to my webinar.
Yeah, you're going to want to mute that.
My name is Kaylee. I am the research coordinator for Dr. Sherry Pagato in the Center for MHealth and Social Media at UConn. I have worked for Dr. Pagato for about 2 years now or so. We do a lot of studies, mostly on cancer prevention and weight loss while utilizing social media and app platforms. Almost all of our studies are conducted on social media. So we do put a lot of time and resources towards using social media for recruitment. So today, I'll be talking about how to leverage social media to help you hopefully recruit your research study participants. So just quickly, as you know already, we're using YouTube Live to do this webinar, so feel free to ask questions during the webinar. I'll save some time towards the end so that we can answer them. So you can chat down below. There's a little chat button. You can ask the questions there, or if you are not signed into a Google account for YouTube, you can just email us. And our email is on the slide there at mhealthcenter@uconn.edu, and we'll make sure to keep an eye on any questions that you send to us through email as well. Okay, so here are the areas that I will cover during this webinar. There really are 4 main topics that I want to cover. So first, just some facts about social media and how it's used in today's world. And then after that, I'll share some tips on how to set yourself up for success so that your social media recruitment can go smoothly and effectively. We've had our fair share of trial and error, so hopefully I can share with you all the stuff that we have learned so that you don't make our mistakes. And then after that, I'll talk about recruiting on 4 different platforms. I'll talk about Facebook and Instagram kind of together, and then Twitter and Reddit as well. There really are so many social media platforms you can recruit on, but these are just the ones that we usually use the most and have the most experience with. And then finally, I'll wrap up with a common issue when using social media to recruit, and that's dealing with fraudulent research participants. So I'll kind of talk about warning signs and then also how to reduce that as well. Okay, so let's start off with some social media facts, and I got all these from the Pew Research Center. So first thing I wanted to do is I wanted to break down the age groups that use social media. So as you can see here, about 90% of young adults between the ages of 18 and 29 use social media. Then it goes down a little bit for adults ages 30 to 49 at 80%, and then it goes down even more with ages 50 to 64, which is about 69%, and then it goes all the way down to 40% for people ages 65 and older. So as you can see here, seniors are using social media at a higher rate than previous years, and young adults are the ones who are using social media the most. But, really, as you can see here, most age groups are really using social media regularly. And then the next thing I wanted to look at is I wanted to break down who uses social media by ethnicity as well. And then once again, according to the Pew Research Center, about 73% of people who are white use social media, 70% of people who are Hispanic use social media, and then 69% of people who are Black use social media. So really the differences are minimal between ethnicity, and that's really a great thing to discover because using social media can be a really good resource to help you increase your ability to gather a diverse group of participants, which is, often a common struggle in recruitment. And for us, we do typically get a more diverse group using social media than when we recruit using more traditional methods. And I also wanted to look at social media use by gender as well. So about 65% of males use social media, while 78% of women use social media, and there's a bit more discrepancy between genders than ethnicity, as we saw on the previous slide, with females using it more. But even with that, majority of both genders are using social media, and this will also help increase diversity in your recruitment sample as well. And then another way I wanted to break down some social media use is I wanted to look at the popular platforms because this can be really important for targeting where you want to recruit. So the 2 most popular platforms are YouTube and Facebook. With 73% of people using YouTube and 69% of adults using Facebook. And, this is not entirely surprising, as YouTube has millions of videos covering almost every topic imaginable, and Facebook will become a household social media platform. And then the next two popular platforms were Instagram, which is owned by Facebook, at 37% of adults using it, and Pinterest with 28% of adults using this platform. So while using general popular platforms is important, there's a little more to it than just choosing popular platforms, and I'll talk about that in a few slides. And finally, I wanted to look at the platforms that had the most daily users. So I'm not sure if you've heard of the show before, but I'm currently watching a show called Silicon Valley on HBO. And for those who don't know, it's a really hilarious show, and I recommend it. It basically follows somebody by the names of Richard Hendricks, who's an engineer, and he tries to build his own company with his friends, and things just really never go right. So in one particular episode pictured on this slide here, he wants to get additional funding for their platform, and he can't because their daily user rate is too low. So from this, working on this webinar and watching this show, I've kind of come to learn more about the importance of daily users. So it's really great to have a popular platform, but daily users is equally important because it shows how many people are actually logging in and being an active member each day, rather than a platform that has been used once in a while or downloaded once and then never to be used again. So YouTube, which was the most popular platform according to Pew, has a daily user rate of about 51%, which is great because the majority of their users use it on a regular basis. And then there's Facebook, which was the second most popular platform, but this had the highest daily user rate of 74%, which shows about 3/4 of their users are using it regularly. And Instagram also had a high daily user rate of 63%. And then there was Twitter, which wasn't even a top 4 popular platform at all, that had a daily high user rate of about 42%. So really, this shows that these 4 platforms have people that are active and are engaging in one way or the other on a regular basis. So, as you can see here, social media is a great outreach tool no matter what demographic you're interested in, whether it be YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest. These are all the platforms that are most widely used and also most regularly used. So also another thing to consider is sort of what age group. So for young adults around 18, 24, 25-ish, their most popular platform is both Instagram and Twitter. And then adults basically from 25 on is really Facebook. So those are kind of the platforms you want to pay attention to depending on your demographic. All right. Let's go ahead and move on now on how to set yourself up for success when recruiting on social media. There really are so many platforms to use and so many ways to use each platform, so no matter what you do, making sure you're prepared is really essential. So the first step is to make a plan, and of course, this does sound obvious, but with social media recruitment, there can be a lot of moving pieces, and you want to make sure that you're equipped to handle that. So the first thing you want to incorporate into your plan is platform choice. You want to decide what platform your target audience mainly uses. So this is really a critical step, and while using a popular platform matters, using a platform or platforms that your audience uses the most is really what you want to go with. Like I was saying before, Facebook is often the go-to platform since it is the most popular and has the most daily active users. However, is Facebook really where your audience is logging in using actively and daily? So you really want to make sure that you choose platforms that your audience is on all the time for the best results. And then another thing you want to consider along with platform choice is your budget. Social media recruitment can be a cheap choice if you choose not to use ads, but if you do any other form, if you don't use ads, but if you choose to start using ads, you want to make sure that you have enough money to afford putting ads out on the platforms that you've decided to recruit on. And I'll talk about ad price later on as well. And then another point you want to incorporate into your plan is advertising. You want to decide on what kind of ads you'll do, whether they're paid ads or if you want to just put resources into kind of free versions of advertising. And then you want to also decide how much effort you're going to put into each type. So for example, what our lab does is we say about 85% of our efforts go into the free forms of advertising, while 15% goes towards more like paid forms such as ads. Another component to add to your plan that builds on platform choice is that while you have the platform choice and kinds of forms of advertising already selected, you do want to go one step further and account for how exactly you're going to use each platform that you've decided on. So, for example, if you decide to use YouTube, you'll have to include in your plan if you're doing ads and videos, maybe just one or the other. While Facebook, maybe you'll post on ads, you'll use ads plus Facebook pages, you never know. So you just really want to take the time to figure that out. And another factor to add into your plan is to account for your staff. You want to assign which staff members will be doing which type of recruitment. So if you have research assistants, who will be in charge of what? And if you have interns or graduate assistants, what will they do to help with recruitment? You want to be as specific as possible in your plan. So, for example, maybe you have a research assistant in charge of Facebook and YouTube ads, while your graduate assistants and interns are in charge of editing and posting YouTube videos. This will help you keep track of who's doing what, and they'll know exactly what their assignment is. And finally, you want to include the amount of time you'll put in each week towards recruitment. And for our lab, we do put it in terms of how many ads we're going to post each week, but it can also be done by how many hours of effort you want to put into each week. So it doesn't really matter which form you do, but you want to make sure you're consistently putting in effort into recruitment on social media, because there's always a flow of constant new information on most of these platforms. So you really do want to make sure that your message is regularly appearing on your audience's timeline. And another thing that we do while we are actively recruiting is that we have a weekly meeting with everyone involved so that we can talk about our progress and any changes that may need to happen and adjust the plan accordingly. So, while this all may sound like a lot of planning, it really is critical so that everything you want gets done and does so in a timely and efficient manner. And another thing we do is when we do start recruiting for a new study, our whole lab sits down and creates this whole plan together. Okay, so of course IRB approval, while everybody does need IRB approval for their study, I do have some suggestions regarding the IRB that I want to talk about that will help you successfully recruit online. So the first is that when you submit your recruitment wording that you use for your message on social media, you want to make sure that you make plenty of different versions of your recruitment wording. You want to make sure that all of these versions are approved by the IRB so that you have a lot of choices when you are recruiting. So, social media is fast moving and people do get bored quickly. So you do need different options to keep your audience's attention. And there are ads that you can see on your feed. I've seen them myself that you kind of just scroll on by because you've seen them a bunch of times. But if you have different versions of your message, that will keep your efforts kind of fresh and new and kind of prevent people from just scrolling right on past. And we usually create a bunch of different versions, and they're typically variations of the same messages. And we do versions that are targeted towards men or young adults, and sometimes targeted towards older adults, depending on sort of what our area that we want to increase our diversity in. So it would be a good idea to create a few versions that cater towards people that you often have a hard time recruiting as well. And another tip is to be mindful of character limits when submitting your recruitment wording to the IRB. Some platforms like Twitter have a character limit, so you want to ensure that some of your versions can be formatted to be posted on platforms that have word or character limits. However, social media is a place where people love to scroll, and they do scroll quickly. So just because a place may or may not have a character limit, you still do not want to create any kind of long-winded or wordy posts. You want to keep your wording to the point and something people will read easily right as they scroll on by. And then finally, your recruitment message is how people on social media will find out about you. So make sure you put some form of contact information so that people can get a hold of you. This sort of does seem straightforward, but I have seen many ads on Facebook or Instagram that really there's no way to get in touch with them. So this, of course, can hinder your efforts. And what we do is we usually put a combination of one or the other, whether it's our email, our phone number, or even the direct link to our screening survey. And that depends on the platform that we're using. And again, you want to make sure that all of the contact information that you're going to be using are included in all the versions you will submit to the IRB. And once again, the reason why this is so important is because since the IRB can be so slow, while social media is so fast-paced, you want to make sure that you're prepared to post content at the pace that social media moves, and you don't want to kind of move at the IRB pace. Okay, and creating images. While getting the wording altered for social media use with all different versions, is really important, you really want to include visuals as well. The visual is really what's going to grab people's attention and draw them into your recruitment message. Here I have 2 out of many examples that we use. On the left is sort of like a banner type image that we created for one of our studies, and the other on the right is a flyer that we use. So as you can see, they're sort of bright, they're simple, they include information about our study or just about the lab. And we also do a few versions of each of these for each of our studies. So for something like the picture on the left, we would use wording from our recruitment messages to post onto social media. And if we use the picture on the right, we would just use the picture on the right, since the graphic includes all the information about the study with the contact information as well. You can use websites like Pablo.com or Canva.com to create these graphics. Usually those are the ones that we use. They're both free to use, and they do have premium subscriptions if you wanted to pay for the premium content. So when you do that, once again, make sure you do have multiple versions to keep people's attention. And another tip for success is to stay organized. So this may also, once again, sort of be another obvious tip, but it is vital. It's easy for everything to get muddled when you have multiple social media platforms involved in your recruitment, especially if you are doing more than just paid advertisements. You want to keep track of all the platforms that you're posting in, which staff members in charge of what, and the budget you have if you are doing advertisements. And you want to make sure that it's updated on a regular basis, since you want to make sure that the ads are being managed properly, and if you're doing kind of sort of free versions of advertisement, that you're posting on a regular basis to keep that content in your audience's attention. We do a lot of the unpaid versions of recruitment, so to speak. So we have a shared Google Sheet that all the research assistants and the graduate assistants use to keep track of where they posted in and when they did so. So what I have here on the slide is an example of a way to keep everything organized. So it's really good to see who's putting in effort where and how much money you're spending on the recruitment, so you can adjust accordingly. Also, staying organized will be really important for any future studies you may do that utilizes social media recruitment as well, because you can look back and see what types of recruitment really worked well for you and what didn't, so that way you can spend more time and effort the next time around on your successful ventures of recruitment and stop doing on what you found didn't work as well. All right. So now that we have some basics down so that you have a foundation that will help you be successful, I'll talk about some of the different platforms you can use for recruitment. These are the ones that we use in our lab the most, since it's the best for our audience, but a lot of the principles and the tips and the tricks for these platforms can really transfer to most of the platforms you may use for your recruitment. So the first platform I will talk about is Facebook. So really, there are 4 main ways to recruit on Facebook. You can do so through paid advertisements. You can ask pages to share your recruitment message. You can post in various Facebook groups, and then you can also use your department or your university page to share your recruitment message. And just for the sake of time and to really focus on the things that work really well, I'm only going to talk about the first 3 because the last one is sort of straightforward. Okay, so first let's talk about using ads on Facebook. Using ads is the easiest method for recruiting on Facebook. They are very easy to set up and maintain. The only downside is that they do cost money. So you create an ad first by signing into whatever account you want to use. The account name doesn't show up in the advertisement, so it doesn't really matter which account you decide to use. You could use like a work account, you could use your departmental Facebook page, it doesn't really matter. The first thing you do is you select the reason why you're creating the ad. What we do is we choose the reach option because there's not an actual research option for the ad. And then from there, you'll select the demographics you're trying to reach. They're specific, so you can set it, whether it's by age, location, ethnicity, gender. You can even set it by interest as well. And then from there, once you do that, you set your own budget, which is really great because you can choose how much money you want to spend for the ads. So you can set it by how much you want to spend each day, or you can also set it to how much you want to spend on a weekly basis as well. So a good thing about getting your budget is that after the ad is posted, you can adjust to increase or decrease the amount of money you're spending. And I'll talk about that more on the next slide. I'll show you what it looks like. And the best part of the Facebook ad is that you can also set where the ad can be seen. You can choose where on the Facebook timeline your ad is seen, whether it's on the main timeline feed, there's like an ad section to the right. You can also do it in the Messenger section, Facebook Stories, Facebook Marketplace, and then also Instagram. So by doing a Facebook ad, you also get Instagram ads as well, which is great because you're targeting two popular platforms at once. And then finally, Facebook allows you to add pictures. You can do a single picture, multiple pictures, or you could do a video if you'd like to go along with your message. So here's an example of what the ad manager looks like on Facebook. So once you set up your ad, Facebook will have this manager section where you can see and edit everything. So you can see like the reach, impressions, frequency, and how much money you've spent. You can also edit and adjust any part of the ad at any point in time with this ad manager. So as you can see here, this is when we were recruiting for one of our studies that we call Slip Buddy. We had 3 different types of ads running, so it showed us the reach, the impressions, and frequency by ad and by overall. So it was really nice to see it in both formats, and it really is good to see it. So if you're not, one ad isn't working, or you're spending too much money or not enough money, you can adjust it that way. So it is important to note that outcomes from ads can be variable depending on what you're recruiting for. We personally haven't had great luck with weight loss intervention studies, but survey studies on different topics might do better. So for example, my PI, Sherry, she has a colleague who's had a lot of success with a survey for smokers using ads, so it can definitely be trial and error. And then the next method for Facebook is recruiting on pages. So this method is certainly more time-consuming than ads, but it can be effective. You're able to target the participant pool you're looking for. However, what happens is that you can't post directly on their page. Only the admin or the manager of that page is able to post. So what that means is that you have to ask them to do so. So the first thing you want to do is search and identify all of the pages you want to ask to share your message. So make sure what you're doing is that you look for pages that would be likely to share your message. So for example, it would be a waste of your time to ask a Weight Watchers group to post your recruitment message about a weight loss program because they wouldn't want people to be taken away from their page. You want to find pages or people that share your interests. So for example, when we do studies about indoor tanning, we often ask tanning salons to share our message about conducting a focus group about indoor tanning because that's where a lot of their audience is. And I would really take the time identifying a bunch of different pages before you start reaching out. It's easier to do it in steps so that way you can keep track. And then after you find all of the pages that align with your research topic in your audience, you'll have to message them on Facebook. So I would start off first by explaining who you are, your intent, and also explain how this will benefit their audience. You also want to keep the message short and sweet. If you have like a very paragraphs long message, it's unlikely that they'll reply to you. They're probably just going to skim right past it. They'll also most likely not post something if they think it's not going to be beneficial to their audience or take away from their page in any way. So that's also something you want to keep in mind. So then, if you message them and you get to talking and they approve, you can send your recruitment message, either through email or just through Messenger again. And another tip I'd have for you is to keep an eye out on their page to see if they actually do post it and make sure you thank them. This method can be a hit or miss in our experience, but if you can find highly engaged pages willing to share your message, it really could yield a great number of prospective participants. We sort of found with our weight loss studies, we weren't as successful with this method, but when we do sort of indoor tanning type studies like focus groups, we've had more success this way. All right, so another method for recruiting on Facebook is posting in groups. And this option is definitely the most time-consuming option, but it can be the most fruitful. So just like recruiting through pages, you can target the participant pool you're looking for. However, this can be a little bit more in-depth because you can target participants by age, gender, interest, location, sort of just like a Facebook ad. You can choose what kind of audience you want to reach, whether it's a small audience, a large audience, maybe both. Small groups are often more engaged than larger groups, but large groups are an easy way to reach a large amount of people very quickly. So you have a lot of more options to reach out with people with this method, There really are so many groups you can post in that the options are almost endless. And there's also two types of groups. There's the public groups or open groups, and then there's also closed groups. Open groups meaning that they're open to the public, so any member on Facebook can kind of see and post in these groups. We don't really post in these, but then there's the closed groups. These are the ones that have like administrators and moderators that are focused on, some type of topic, and you usually have to request to join, and then once you're approved into the group, then you can see the feed and engage in it. And these are the types of groups that we typically post in. So for closed groups, this is really where most of our effort comes into play when we do social media recruitment. So if you do choose to use Facebook as a recruitment platform, I really would highly recommend posting in closed groups. Just like the pages method, you should take time, to identify all the groups you want to post in. And, there's just so many Facebook groups. You really want to make sure that you have a strategy on finding the groups you're interested in. Because like I said, the options are almost endless. And what we typically do is we like to target popular cities in each state and then go from there. And the most success that we've had is usually with neighborhood groups, like the buy, sell, rent type of groups. Because soliciting of any kind is usually allowed, but in topic focus groups, there could be more pushback, and that's sort of been our experience. These groups are communities, and communities may not like people barging in to solicit for research participants. However, that's not to say that we haven't gotten into any topic focus groups before, because we have. And usually we do this by messaging the admin, back and forth about our intent and sort of developing a relationship with them. So for best results, you really do need to make a connection and build a relationship with one of the admins or the moderators. And really the exception to this rule is the neighborhood groups like the buy, sell, rent type groups, because this type of posting is usually normal. Also, when we mention Yukon in communities outside of Connecticut, sometimes people are confused, so you really should consider the optics of the post in context of where it's posted. So instead, if we say Yukon is recruiting nationwide, it makes a lot more sense. Otherwise, it could seem confusing, maybe like a mistake or even spam. And then another thing you want to be mindful of is the face of the profile you're using. So for example, a profile of a man is not going to get into a mom or woman-based Facebook group, so make sure your staff members are joining groups that the admins won't deny just on their profile photo alone. So once you identify the groups you want to post in, you have to request to join. It's very simple. It's usually just a request button that you hit. However, most of the time, especially in topic focus groups, they'll request that you answer a few questions about why you want to join. So what you want to do is you want to answer these honestly. And if you end up having to answer those questions, you should also message one of the admins and explain in more detail why you want to post in the group and how it would be beneficial to their members. And then you really want to make a note that you're not planning to spam and you're going to follow and respect the rules of their group. So, assuming you get past all of this and you're able to post, make sure that you switch up your recruiting, wording, your images on a weekly basis. You want to always grab their attention instead of them thinking it's an old post and scrolling past it. So for our weight loss studies, we do usually have good success this way, and we often do get a good number of participants. Okay, so reducing your appearance as a spammer. So this is really important, that in order to have a successful social media recruitment is that you don't appear as a bot or a spam account. So when I first started here, about 6 months in, I ended up having my recruitment account shut down because people thought I was a spammer. So I had a lot of groups that I was in and a lot of effort I put toward pages and things like that, and all of it was just gone in a moment, and then I had to start from scratch. So hopefully I can give you guys some tips that I've learned along the way, so that way you don't have to do that either. So when you're posting on any social media platform, especially Facebook, but any platform applies, you should have each staff member create their own work account. And you really want to make it look authentic. Facebook especially is very big on authenticity, so you want to post a photo of yourself. It doesn't really matter as long as a professional photo or it could not be. It doesn't actually matter as long as it's authentic looking. That's what's really important. You want to put a cover photo, make a bio if you have to. Really, you just want to fill out your profile as you would for your own personal account. Also, if you do have multiple staff members create accounts, you want them to all friend each other. So that way, each account looks like they have any friends or followers, because it can be a red flag to Facebook when you don't have any kind of friends. Another thing you want to do is you want to log in on a regular basis, even if you're not recruiting, so it looks like you're using the platform. If you want to, you can change your profile picture, every several months or so, just to make it seem more authentic. And then another thing you want to do is really stick to a posting schedule. So social media platforms, and once again, especially Facebook, is really quick to flag and shut down your account if they see you posting and joining in a bunch of groups each day, especially back to back, and even more so if they're from all over the country. So before you're in groups, you want to make sure that you're only requesting to join so many each day, because you don't want Facebook to flag your account. So what we did is we usually do about 6 to 7 groups a day per staff member. And if we're already in a group and they don't have a rule about how often we post, we only post our recruitment message once a week. And we do this because we don't want to annoy the members of the group, but also we still want to keep our recruitment message relevant, so that's why we stick to once a week. And you want to keep track of everything, of course. So you want to keep track of which groups you've requested to join, which ones you've been denied to post in, and which ones you've been approved to post in. That way, you know not to re-request to join a group you've been denied in, because that can also result in a red flag to your account. And if you haven't heard from an admin that you have messaged, you probably want to follow up with them. But we would reach out to them once or twice after the original time, and then after that we move it to our denied list. So hopefully this will help you from being perceived as a spam account. Recruiting on Twitter. So as a refresher, Twitter has one of the top 4 highest daily user rates of social media platforms. There really are 3 ways to recruit on Twitter, and it's typically less time intensive than some of the methods of Facebook recruitment. So the first is to create an account and invest time in your account in order to build an audience. And I'll go more into this in the next slide. And then the second is to ask, prominent or influencer accounts to retweet your recruitment message. And this can be done either through direct messaging or tagging them in a reply or a tweet. And then finally, you can have your followers retweet your recruitment message onto their timeline. And this one sort of goes hand in hand with the first approach. So you want to invest in your audience, like I said before. And Twitter does have a totally different feel than Facebook. There's no groups on Twitter like there is on Facebook. People really just follow you on Twitter if they find your content interesting so that it can appear in their timeline. So one thing you want to do is build up your audience and follow accounts that can relate to your audience. And that is important because they may follow you back, and that way you gain followers who will see your content. This will also help you when you tweet about your recruitment message, because you can have a high number of followers retweet your message, and it can help spread across your community and your participant pool. And then with that, you also want to tweet on a regular basis. So we often share news, whether it's regarding our lab or just about MHealth or social media, and we do that on our feed. And we typically post once or twice a day on our Twitter account, and we even do so on the weekends as well. Another thing we do is we take the time to read and reply to other people's accounts as well in order to build our follower base. So you want to make sure that you're sharing other people's tweets as well. So Twitter really is a reciprocal platform, so you're making sure that you're engaged with people. If you want to share things with others, is super important. So if you have a colleague that's recruiting for a study that relates to your audience, or maybe they're just hiring for a position, it'd be beneficial to retweet their information onto your feed so that your followers can see this. For one, you're helping a follower and a colleague, and 2, it's possible that they may return the favor in the future when you need some recruitment information to be disseminated. And then this also is important because you want your Twitter account to be more than just asking people to retweet your message, because otherwise, if you do just asking people to retweet your message, it really could come across as spam-like, which would turn people off to your account. So really, you want to take the time to make an account that your audience would be interested in reading from and learning from, or even interacting with. So it does take time, of course. So I would start even before you wanted to start recruiting for a study, because it's never too early to create a foundation of followers that will come in handy later. Another thing is that you really do have to be an active Twitter member, and you really do want to build up on that social capital on that platform for your best results. Okay, asking for retweets. So this is another approach, and this is you typically want to ask for retweets from prominent or influencer accounts. One thing to note, though, is that if you ask an influencer account to retweet your message, it will most likely come with a cost, because that's usually often how they make their money. So going for a prominent or influencer account is a great way to reach a large audience, but it does mean that it could be harder to get in contact with them. So first thing you want to do, just like recruiting on Facebook, is to take the time to identify all the accounts you want to reach out to before you actually start doing it. And besides finding accounts with large audiences, another key part is finding accounts that have relevant audience as well. You really want to be realistic about the accounts that will be likely to retweet you. So, Kim Kardashian is highly unlikely to retweet your message, but maybe a colleague on Twitter, that has similar interests would be more likely to share. You want to take the time to map out the accounts that you want to reach out to and set a goal of how many you want to reach out to each week. You want to find a balance of not annoying your followers, but also getting a good outreach on a regular basis. And like I said before, you can do that either through direct messaging or tagging them in a reply or a post. What I would do is I would always opt for direct messaging if the option is there. That way your followers don't see just a bunch of tweets of you reaching out to people, because it can get annoying. However, some accounts don't have a direct message option. If you don't follow each other, sometimes you can set your direct messages so that only followers and reciprocal followers can be direct messaged. So if that's the case, then I would go to tagging them in a tweet or reply to recruit your message. So just be mindful of how often you do it. You also want to make sure, as stated earlier, that you can fit your message within the 280 character limit as well. But then also kind of treading that fine line of also not being too wordy, but still getting that message across. And same thing with Facebook groups. You want to be able to follow up with them, but not bother them. So I would say, just like Facebook groups, maybe follow up with them once or twice every couple of weeks or so, and then if not, kind of just move on. Because once again, you don't want to be too annoying and perceived as spam. And, Twitter can be trickier than Facebook to recruit on, but if you learn how to use the platform and are comfortable with it and have a good following, it really can be a successful way. All right, now we can move on to recruiting on Reddit. Reddit is certainly one of the easier platforms to recruit on because there really is only one approach, and that's just to post in subreddits. It's very straightforward. I would say that this platform, though, is best used for surveys or focus groups. We haven't had great success for studies that involved an intervention portion, but we have had gotten great results when we've needed participants for a focus group, then recruiting for our weight loss studies. However, with Reddit, it is key that you need to have experience with the platform because Reddit has a lot of rules, and each subreddit usually has more specific rules that need to be followed. So like I said before, and I'll say it again, just like any platform that you end up recruiting on, you want to do your research before you start posting. So with Reddit, you want to search the subreddits on the main page. You can just type all the interests or topics that your audience would be attracted to, and then find those subreddits to post in. Some subreddits you have to join, but it's much easier than Facebook, where you just usually get accepted pretty quickly. You don't have to ask questions or answer questions or anything like that. But of course, as always, you should also map out which groups you want to post in each day. And then once you map out the groups you want to post in, set a schedule of which ones you're going to post in each day. So Reddit is more strict than Twitter and Facebook in the sense that you can't post things back to back on Reddit. You usually have to wait somewhere between 15 minutes to 30 minutes in between each post, because if you try to post back to back, Reddit will stop you and tell you to come back later to try to do it. So I would really only shoot for a few a day, because otherwise you won't be able to get very far with it. And then an important caveat with Reddit is that the subreddits have rules, like I was saying earlier. They have people who monitor the threads, and if you break the rules, you'll be kicked out and they'll block you from the group. So be sure to read all of the rules prior to posting and following all of them. And if your post gets deleted and you get blocked, of course it can hinder your research recruitment efforts. So an example here is the rules of a subreddit that's explicitly for research studies. So for this subreddit, you have to follow specific rules about how your message is posted, how you post the title, and how often you're able to repost and things like that. So here I have some good subreddits that are tailored for research. Sometimes they can be hard to find, so I just wanted to share some of the popular ones we use. So we have the subreddit sample size, research clinics, and paid studies. Sample size is certainly the most popular out of those three, but of course all three are good. So really quickly before we move on, there's one final thing I want to touch on and end with platforms, is that it's really important to be a user of the platform to the point where you have a comfort level using it and understand the unwritten rules of the road, so to speak. And this really does go for all social media platforms and not just the ones I mentioned today. Each platform has different norms and etiquette, and if you aren't familiar with those, you're likely to violate them, and then you could compromise your reputation and ability to recruit in the future. So it really is important to take the time to get to be familiar with each platform that you plan on recruiting from. Okay, so we've been talking about social media recruitment and all the different platforms, and of course, social media really is a great tool for recruitment. But unfortunately, there are some things to be aware of, like fraudulent research participants. These are typically the people who are applying for the study just to receive compensation or maybe some other items that they would receive for the study, instead of being genuinely interested in being part of the research process. So in the next couple of slides, I'll talk about some different signs that suggest they could be fraudulent so that you can be aware of this, and then also how to put some plans in action to reduce the amount of fraudulent research participants in your study. So what to look out for. So back in 2012, Dr. Huang and his colleagues did a paper to identify some warning signs about survey respondents, and I'm going to talk about these 4 warning signs in this slide. So these are the 4 warning signs you really want to pay attention to when it comes to targeting and identifying these fraudulent research participants. The first thing you want to pay attention to is consistency of the participants' responses across related items on a survey. So for example, say on your initial screening survey, you ask about medical issues and that particular participant says they have none. And then later down the line, you ask about any medications that they're taking, and then they list a myriad of a bunch of different kinds of medications. This would be a red flag because these related items do not match up. It could be just because this person is being careless about the questions and just flying right past them, or it could be because they're intentionally lying. Either way, it's something that can reduce the accuracy of your research findings if that person really isn't a true fit for your study. And then there's the second sign that you want to look out for, which is how fast surveys are completed. So if your survey takes 5 minutes and then it ends up being completed in 30 seconds to maybe a minute, it's a sign that that person is just going through it and responding without taking the time to attentively reply. And once again, it could mean either that this person is putting anything to get into the study, or they're not just taking the time to answer the question thoughtfully. But either way, it can still negatively impact the study. The third warning sign you want to look out for is people who have answers that are implausible or factually wrong. So, for example, if someone says that they've gone indoor tanning 100 times in the past week, that could be a red flag. So that's something that you would want to look out for your particular audience in your particular study. And then finally, the last sign to look out for is carefulness of the measures that involve self-report. So this is something that we come across a lot and that we have a lot of issues with. So for example, say you ask for their height in a survey and you ask for in inches and they put 51. You're unsure if they're truly saying they really are 51 inches or if they misunderstood the question and they put 51 meaning 5 feet 1 inch. So you really want to pay attention to that. And usually these people, on our end at least, are automatically placed on our radar, and we typically reach out to them to get more information to better assess their credibility. So altogether, these signs could be due to a person's carelessness or intentional fraud, but either way, you want to look out for these because this can impact the quality of your participant pool and then down the line your findings as well. Alright, so fortunately, there are ways to reduce fraudulent research participants from getting into your study. Of course, there's never a foolproof way to remove all of them, but you can reduce the amount that get into your study. So the first thing is to monitor IP addresses. You can block IP addresses from submitting multiple surveys. So really you have them submit it once and then once again that's it. And I get it that not everyone will be able to have the resource to be able to do that, but if you use Qualtrics, for example, they're able to do such a thing, so it's something to keep in mind if you end up using a company like Qualtrics to help you with recruitment. It's one way to help keep one person from trying to split multiple surveys, and it reduce the ability of one person trying to pretend to be multiple people. Another way to reduce fraudulent research participants is to exclude poor quality respondents from your study. We often pair this tip with the next tip, which I'll talk about in a second. And for this, if you see someone who hits one or more of the 4 warning signs, you really want to consider excluding them from your study. We do exclude poor quality respondents from our study all the time, but we usually wait until we get in contact or attempt to get in contact with them before we're making our decision. So that brings us to the next step. So another way to provide another form of contact is to add an additional screener over the phone. So what we end up doing is we will see anybody that's a red flag to us or potentially eligible. What we do is we reach out to them. So regardless if they seem fraudulent or real, we do give everybody a second screener, and we do so over the phone. And what we do is we'll email them, ask them for their phone number, and then we'll schedule a phone call with them. And then during the call, we'll go over some basic study information, we'll consent them, we'll ask them if they have any questions, concerns, confirm their name, email address, some things that they said over the survey to see if there were any inconsistencies. And then if they had any fraudulent or red flag things that were on the survey or through the phone, we'll kind of question them more, and we'll assess for any more inconsistencies. And if we end up not getting a hold of them at all for our phone screening, we just exclude them for the study. And if they seem fraudulent over the phone, what we'll do is we'll bring it up with our PI, and then we'll decide sort of together whether or not to exclude them. So this step will often weed out people who are not willing to take the steps to be in the intervention, and also the people who are trying to be fraudulent. And then another thing we do over the phone is ask them how they found out about the study. And we kind of do this for 2 reasons. We do this, one, to keep track of the successful places that have worked for us. That way we can use it again in the future. But also because we're monitoring to see if they say a place in which we have not recruited for. So, for example, say you've recruited solely on Reddit, and then you ask this person, where they saw, and they found out about your study, and they say that they saw it on Facebook, on an advertisement. It's probably a good sign that they're fraudulent. And finally, when you're creating your survey, you want to ask questions that only your audience can answer. That way, when you're reviewing your responses, if you see some answers to those questions that don't really make sense, you consider removing them for exclusion because they may not be who they say they are. So ultimately, you want to exclude these people either by blocking IP addresses or excluding themselves, but by doing so, you really want to make sure that they're truly fraudulent, and adding extra questions to your survey or adding an additional step like a screening step phone call can help weed out those participants. Okay, so to summarize everything, you first want to set yourself up for success. You want to make a plan accounting for all the details, from budget to platform choice. You want to get your IRB approval for all your recruitment messages, and you also want to have all those different images to switch it up. And you want to stay organized throughout your entire process. You want to make sure you're familiar with each platform you post in. So, Facebook is a great resource for social media recruitment. Groups are the most fruitful, and their ads cross multiple social media platforms like Instagram. And then with Twitter, you want to invest your time into your account and prioritize the accounts that you want to direct message and tag to get retweets. Then when it comes to Reddit, this platform is really great for surveys, but you want to make sure that you follow the rules of each subreddit you can get blocked. And then, of course, there's always the risk of fraudulent research participants, like I was just saying. You want to keep an eye out for those warning signs, consistency, time of response, things like that. Thankfully, you can exclude them and put additional steps to rule them out. And, altogether, taking the time to set yourself up for success, utilizing and implementing a recruitment plan on social media, and monitoring for fraudulent research participants can all equal a fruitful social media recruitment strategy. So really quickly, before we get to questions, I want to quickly plug some upcoming events happening in our lab. So in our webinar series, we only have 2 more left after this one. So the next one we have is April 6th, and that is titled Large National Data Sets Assessing Health-Related Use of the Internet, Technology, and Social Media. And then the last one we're hosting is this summer on June 15th, and this is part of a mini part, if you will. This is part 2 of Research Project Management webinar series, and this is more about developing a plan to guide and manage your projects. And then finally, in May, we are hosting our 4th annual conference. This year's theme is building an evidence base for commercially available technology. So if you're interested in it and you want to find out more information, you can, and to register, because registration is now open, you can go to our website below that you can see here on the slide, which is mhealth.inchip.uconn.edu/events. Okay. So that wraps everything up. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my webinar. Hopefully you learned something new. So now we do have some time left. Yeah, we have about like 10 minutes or so if you guys have any questions. So as a reminder, you can type it in the chat on YouTube. If you have to, you need to sign into a Google account to do that. But if not, you can email us at mhealthcenter@uconn.edu, and we'll check that as well to answer any questions. Okay. So let's see, we have some questions. Hi, what account do you run the ads from? A university account? That's a good question. We don't actually. We have, we'll pick one of our staff members to have their work account run it, and then they sort of the ones in charge of managing it. So you can use a university account if you want to, but you don't have to. We use a work account from one of our staffs, and thankfully the account name doesn't show in the ad when you post it, so it doesn't actually really matter which account you use. Okay. And then another question we have here is, what is the difference between open and public groups on Facebook? So really what it is, excuse me, is that open groups is that anyone can view the group, the members, and the post, meaning that you don't have to actually be in it. So like if you're just a regular Facebook member, you can see all of that information. And then there's a closed group where you can see the groups but not the posts, meaning that like if you were to search the name of the group, you could find it online, but if you were to click it on Facebook, you can't actually access the feed or anything, and you couldn't post yourself. But those are the ones that you have to request to join. And then once you're approved, you can see it. And then there's actually they've changed the wording, so there's a secret group as well, which is very similar to a closed group. The only difference is that secret groups are one where if you were to search the name of the group, you wouldn't be able to actually find it or any of its information. People that are already in the group would have to invite you into that group, and then once you were in the group, then you could be able to see everything else. So those are sort of the 3 names of the types of Facebook groups. So another question we have is, how much staff time per week is spent on recruitment, both during the planning phase and the active recruitment phase? So we would say, 1 to 2 hours a week of posting recruitment info per staff during active time and less during planning. It sort of depends on the sample size. We have much more staff time spent fielding and screening responses than posting recruitment information. All right, another question is, how often should you post on Facebook groups? So we recommend 1 time a week per group. So if you were to get really specific about it, we even recommend doing Thursday or Friday afternoons once a week, just because that's usually when people are the most active in their groups. But you don't have to, as long as it's 1 time a week. And then another tip to that is, if there's a specific group that has rules about when you're posting. So for example, some groups might have like businesses and advertisements can either be posted once a month, or some people have it like only on Tuesdays. So you really want to make sure that you take the time to identify that and do that. And if you, say example, it's like once a month and you post twice a month, it's possible that the group will block you. And another question we have is, hi, thanks for this webinar. Hi. We've tried to use Twitter for advertising for our research study, but our account and ads are always denied. We think it's because Twitter doesn't allow advertising for clinical trials without prior authorization. Do you know what the process is like? No, what we do is we just tweet about our own study info with our IRB protocol number. We really haven't had too much issue in the past, so hopefully maybe just using your own account should be able to kind of bypass that. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to see if there's any more questions here. Oh, wow. Okay. There seems to be a lot. Okay, let me just see what we have here. Okay. Have you used Hootsuite or another social media account manager to plan and manage multiple social media platforms? We haven't used Hootsuite for recruitment before. We usually use it just for scheduling things. I don't know, I couldn't speak to how Hootsuite would work for managing multiple social media platforms, but typically just using something like a Google Sheet or something is usually sufficient. Okay, let's see if we have any other questions. Let me check the email account really quickly. Okay, well, I think that wraps it up. I think that if you don't have any more questions, if you guys do have any more questions or if you have any follow-up questions for me, feel free to go ahead and email me. My email is right on the slide. It's Kaylee, Kaylei.archangel, arcangel@uconn.edu, and I will be happy to answer your questions. So thank you so much for your time, and have a good day.